is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi rules out resorting to military action to settle the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam dispute. Kenya reopens its airspace, but flights from several African and European countries remain suspended. And China commemorates the founding of the People's Liberation Army. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, South Africa's trade surplus rises following an increase in exports of precious metals and stones. And in sports, organizers cancelled the 2020 edition of the Great Ethiopian Run due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We begin the top of the hour in Kenya. International flights have resumed in the country following the easing of movement restrictions by President Uhuru Kenyatta last month. And as CGTN's Robert Nagila reports, this was a busy day at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport.
After more than 4 months of suspended operations in an attempt to control the spread of COVID-19, Nairobi's Jomo Kenyatta International Airport resumed international flights Saturday as Kenya reopened its airspace. And it's hard to miss the new normal, as it's now referred to. The airport is littered with sanitation points, masks are now mandatory, social distancing guidelines are plastered on all surfaces, seats clearly spaced out, and security checks have been intensified. For passengers arriving into the country, a COVID certificate is mandatory.
COVID certificate on a test taken not earlier than 96 hours before flight.
Those we spoke to traveling on KQ100 to London were satisfied with measures put in place.
I'm very satisfied, especially the way they are moving the lines.
I'm confident. I'm pretty sure that's going to be okay.
By midday, traffic was steadily increasing. But it's a national carrier, Kenya Airways, that is breathing a huge sigh of relief. The resumption of international flights is a huge boost for Kenya Airways. The airline lost hundreds of millions of dollars when Kenyan airspace was closed and will be hoping to make up for lost time.
Since late March, when we stopped flying, up to now, we have probably lost between around about $100 million. When we project to the end of the year, based on the demand that we see today, we will lose about $400 million of revenue.
The company's laid off more than 600 employees and says it will increase traffic according to demand. In the meantime, it says it's resumed flights to 30 destinations. The airline has, however, been barred from neighboring Tanzania after the country was included in a list of countries not allowed to travel to Kenya. Flights to China and the United States are expected to resume in October. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Tour operators are among the many people who've welcomed news about the resumption of international flights in Kenya. For an industry that nearly came to a halt due to the pandemic, the return of travel comes as good news at a time of many difficulties due to the coronavirus pandemic. CGTN's Jin Keo has that story.
At this time of the year, Kenyan hotels would be fully booked as foreign tourists trooping to see the annual wildebeest migration in the Mara Game Reserve. The warm weather at the coast and the abundant wildlife at game reserves have always attracted visitors from all across the world. But the coronavirus pandemic changed all that after international travel was stopped as part of measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. However, the resumption of international flights has tour operators hoping for better returns.
Kenya's tourism, it is largely dependent on international tourism. So the resumption of international air traffic is very critical for us because it means now you can come into the country. we can start selling packages and you can actually come to the country and enjoy the tourism. So that is a very critical and very much needed.
As the sector seeks to turn around its fortunes, it has implemented anti-epidemic measures as the coronavirus still poses a risk. Zhang Huanqiang is the chairman of the Kenya Chinese Tourism Association. He runs a hotel in the Masai Mara Game Reserve. He says he cannot take any chances. He's ensuring that all health protocols set by the Kenyan government are followed to the letter.
Before reopening, we did a lot of preparatory work to fight the epidemic actively. According to the requirements of the Kenyan government, all the employees need to be tested for COVID-19. After we got the certificates, we bought face masks, gloves, disinfectant, and professional hand-washing machines.
Implementing safety measures is not cheap, but tour operators say they will not pass the additional costs to visitors.
I would assume that right now to reopen the businesses, the initial inclination may be to absorb most of the cost, so that's to entice the traveler to come without an extra cost, because the traveler is also suffering. So we don't expect a heavy transfer of burden to the client, but there will be a heavy burden on the operators to comply with health and safety.
For the tourists who decide to travel at this time, better deals await them. That's because most hotels and popular tourist destinations have reduced their prices as they try to attract more business.
Due to the pandemic, almost all the hotels are closed. The staff went home without a source of revenue. Now they're very excited to come back to work.
Apart from agriculture, tourism is one of Kenya's biggest foreign exchange earners, and the return of international flights is expected to boost the industry that has already suffered one of its worst moments due to the global health crisis. Jane Keo, CGTN.
And several months into the coronavirus pandemic, the aviation industry in Africa is gearing up to resume operations. Some of the major airlines operating within the continent are expected to welcome passengers in accordance with guidelines issued by the International Civil Aviation Organization. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy looks at some of the new regulations.
The International Civil Aviation Organization produced new guidelines with advice from the World Health Organization on what governments need to do to resume international air transport amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The new guidelines are intended to support the restart of air travel in a safe, secure, and sustainable way. Now, just to take you through some of the COVID-19 protocols in place for the aviation industry. Now, departing passengers will be expected to arrive at the airport at least 4 hours before boarding, go through airport health screening procedures, present a valid health certificate from their respective health ministries. Now, passengers to wear face masks and observe physical distancing. In addition, countries have also come up with their own specific guidelines subject to changes on short notice. Now, cabin crew to wear gloves, aircraft crew to maintain the 1.5-meter rule inside the cabin. Now, reduced food and drink services, modified services that reduce interactions between passengers and the crew in flight. Operators to avoid long stopovers and layovers to reduce the risk of infection. The crew members will be restricted to their hotel rooms except for emergencies. Here are some of the major airlines that have rolled out flight schedules in Africa. Egypt Air returned to the African sky back in July with flights to Tunis and Addis Ababa. It's now gradually resuming flights to Nairobi and N'Djamena, starting 1st of August. Also, at the start of the month, Rwanda Air will begin passenger services to Cotonou, Douala, and Lusaka, among other African routes. Now, we're also seeing Kenya Airways opening its doors to over 30 African locations with flights to Antananarivo, Yaoundé, and Harare, among others. Ethiopian Airlines has remained operational throughout the past months. Now that more national airspaces are reopening, the carriers plan to resume further services pending on travel restrictions. There are planned flights to dozens of African cities, including Abidjan, Conakry, and Mogadishu. Other airlines with plans to restart their African routes include Air France, British Airways, Emirates, KLM, and Qatar Airways. Now, according to a latest report by the African Airlines Association, Africa's aviation industry will suffer an estimated revenue loss of $8 billion this year as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The impact assessment analysis shows passenger revenue dropped to $403 million in the first quarter of 2020. Now, this represents 13.8% drop year on year, with more impact expected to be seen in quarter two, costing $2.7 billion. And that's it from me. Back to you.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has ruled out resorting to military action to settle the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam dispute. He says negotiations are the only way to resolve the standoff over the mega dam project. Yasser Hakim has more details.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has made it clear that unlike in the Libyan conflict, he will not resort to ordering military action over the GERD crisis.
I respect all points of view, but I'm telling you Egyptians, there is no military option. We are in the middle of negotiations. It's a very long process. It's a battle in itself. I assure you, we will not sign any deal that will harm us. We respect Ethiopia's need for electricity, but it should not affect our water share.
His statement came following some calls from the public seeking tougher action by Egypt if Ethiopia fills and operates the dam unilaterally.
He has dismissed the military option because Ethiopia and Egypt know the huge cost of war and the losses it will incur. We have to put this in consideration. Egypt has maintained throughout the past years that military action is out of question and it will only resort to negotiations.
But what are the cards Egypt can use now after 9 years of protracted negotiations with Ethiopia?
First, we have strong ties with many influential countries that can interfere to avoid a possible conflict by two large African countries. Then you have the Security Council, who will also try to push for a deal to be signed.
For now, Egypt is banking on diplomacy as the African Union leads talks to end the standoff. Yasser Hakim, CGTN, Cairo.
Today marks 2 years since the Democratic Republic of Congo announced its 10th Ebola outbreak in the east of the country. That outbreak was declared over 2 months ago after claiming more than 2,200 lives. But a new outbreak is now raging in the northwestern province of Equateur. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more.
The DRC's 10th Ebola outbreak was declared in the eastern province of North Kivu on August 1, 2018. Authorities recorded over 3,400 cases and more than 2,200 deaths. The outbreak was the second largest in the world. It occurred in an active conflict zone, making it difficult for health workers to reach patients. But it was declared over on June 25th.
It's the second anniversary of the Ebola outbreak that occurred in the east of the country. We are proud that our government and international partners managed to end that outbreak. But we are now dealing with another Ebola outbreak in Equateur province.
A new Ebola outbreak was declared in the northwestern province of Equateur on June 1st, as the one in the east was nearing its end. It's the 11th Ebola outbreak to occur in the DRC since 1976. The disease has spread to 7 health zones with 73 cases recorded. The outbreak has occurred in a remote area with dense rainforests. Health workers say the response to the disease has been overshadowed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Today marks Army Day in China, a day to commemorate the founding of the People's Liberation Army. It was initially known as the Chinese Workers' and Peasants' Red Army when it was founded in 1927. Earlier today, a flag-raising ceremony was held at Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Well, let's take a look at the Chinese People Liberation Army's growing role in UN peacekeeping missions across the world. Chuck Tinte tells us more.
China joined the United Nations peacekeeping missions for the first time in 1990 when it sent 5 military observers to the Middle East. Since then, among the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, China is the largest contributor of personnel to UN peacekeeping efforts. In the past 3 decades, some 40,000 Chinese blue helmet troops have been deployed to 25 UN peacekeeping operations in war-torn areas. They have treated more than 200,000 patients and completed many long and short-distance patrols. 15 Chinese peacekeepers have sacrificed their lives in these missions.
China speed, China quality, and China model can be found in every mission area, especially the local residents. They're very grateful to Chinese peacekeepers for maintaining peace with blood and life.
China's active participation in UN peacekeeping is in line with its commitment to multilateral organizations as a means of cooperation and achieving peace and stability. It has established a peacekeeping office and a center for training personnel in Beijing. At present, more than 2,500 Chinese peacekeepers are serving in 9 areas. China is also the second largest contributor to the UN's peacekeeping budget. At the 2015 UN Peacekeeping Summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged China's commitment to building a permanent Chinese UN peacekeeping standby force of 8,000 troops. As of 2017, registration for this has been completed. He also promised free military aid of $100 million to the African Union.
I think we'll definitely step up our efforts in peacekeeping. For example, we'll send more Chinese troops to the front line. We'll train foreign peacekeeping troops and provide peacekeeping equipment. We'll also further join the peacekeeping standby mechanism.
Where peace remains fragile, top officials have said China will not waver in delivering on its promise to UN peacekeeping efforts. Chuck Tintes, CGTN.
And coming up on Africa Live. Homeschooling takes root in Kenya as learning institutions remain closed due to COVID-19. Welcome back. Now, in Kenya, as in many countries around the world, schools have closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Homeschooling for children is slowly gaining popularity as more parents embrace it. Some of them feel that mainstream education places learners under great pressure, unlike homeschooling, which allows guardians to always be close to their children. CGTN's Nick Mudimba has more on that story.
For many parents, giving their children a decent education remains a lifetime goal. This pushes them to try and give the young ones the best education possible. In Africa, countries have adopted different curriculums in the education systems. Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world hard, many parents now play an active role in the children's education. Some actually started doing so a long time ago.
You have a goal to achieve.
We meet Dolly Odhiambo, a mother of 2 who has been homeschooling her children for more than a decade now. Every morning, she takes them through the Accelerated Christian Education Program, also known as ACE. Her husband wanted the children to get a Christian foundation while adopting the fundamentals of homeschooling. The couple was inspired by a nearby homeschooling center.
We had never heard of it. So they took us through their classes, they took us through the curriculum, and my husband just felt this is something that worth trying. And then he told me that his desire was when our daughter finishes her preschool, we could try transit them to this system.
The Accelerated Education Program is individualized for each learner. It's designed to allow each student to work at their pace and ability in many subjects, including mathematics, sciences, languages, and arts. The learners, however, say society looks at them differently due to the homeschooling.
I was basically known as the boy who doesn't go to school. Everyone knew me as the boy who doesn't go to school. Everyone knew Kina mom, like mom and dad, as people who can't afford for me to go to school, me and my sister.
One of the things that I have, or we have achieved as with the children is one, being there for them, being part of their schooling journey is so important, because it helps you understand your child. You understand their joys, you understand their weaknesses, you understand their struggles.
In homeschooling, the talent of children is further strengthened. Both these children are good in the arts. Music is part of their growth. The classwork is strictly monitored by the homeschooling parent, who makes sure that all goals set as well as deadlines are met. The children are taught critical, creative, and independent thinking.
In an 844 system, like when I was in school, no matter how fast or how slow you are, you have to move with the whole classroom. So it will take 1 year before you transit into the next class.
According to Dolly, the pressure to perform well in national exams across Africa has made many students start cramming instead of understanding the concepts taught.
If you do not understand a concept, the concept of a subject, you will beat about the bush, you will cram your way around it, and it can make any subject very, very tedious.
The students sit for final exams that are recognized in Kenya through a body known as Pearsons, which places them in different universities across the globe after completing their coursework. With majority of the schools now closed in different parts of the world, parents are now scrambling for homeschooling. They're hoping that the knowledge momentum that children had will actually be up to par. But also, it's a rare opportunity for the first time to be closer to the children like never before. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
And in what could be a silver lining for South Africa amid the current coronavirus pandemic, the trade surplus has gone up. The country's positive balance widened to $2.7 billion last month. According to the South African Revenue Services, this is the biggest surplus since 1990. The statement attributes this to a 19% surge in exports of precious metals and stones. However, imports dropped by around 18%, with imports of textiles dropping by a whopping 53%. And coming up in the sports. Organizers cancelled the 2020 edition of the Great Ethiopian Run.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The 2020 edition of the biggest road race in Africa, the Great Ethiopian Run, was earlier this week cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The event, started by retired distance running icon Haile Gebrselassie, was scheduled to mark its 20th anniversary this year. Organizers of the 10-kilometer road race say public health was a key factor in the decision, as CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi now reports.
The 2019 Great Ethiopian Run in Addis Ababa. For some, it was a time to set their professional athletics records, but for many, it was a time to enjoy. Foreigners coming from far and wide. The excitement during these races is often taken a notch higher when participants meet in person Haile Gebrselassie Ethiopia's athletics legend and also the founder of the competition. But this year, the COVID-19 pandemic will not allow this to happen.
We had 45,000 runners last year, and we returned more than 10,000 people because we closed registration in 5 days, and people have to go. It's not all electronic. People have to physically go to register. So the demand is huge, but we cannot do that now. Public gathering is not allowed.
The state of emergency declared in Ethiopia because of the pandemic limits gatherings to only 4 people, and the requirements for social distancing make the race impossible. COVID-19 cases in Ethiopia are on the rise, with the Ministry of Health warning that the country is yet to hit its peak. The management of the competition says it will give an update again in September about a new date, with a probability that this year's race will take place in the first half of the year 2021, and the 21st edition of the competition will be held during the normal date, which is November 2021. To keep the momentum of the race, the management has been encouraging virtual runs, but with a limitation of 500 participants who are awarded souvenirs.
We just want to start small and then try to grow it, and then we need to see the practices in other parts of the world. And then, sometimes it's good. The special souvenir medal, not everyone will do it. It will be only a specific number of people, and we want to make it special. But for sure, we will increase the number, but we don't want to be ambitious.
But the virtual run leaves out thousands of such fans who now can only hope that the global health scare fades away soon and they get to physically participate in this annual fun event. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
A federal appeals court on Friday overturned